I think a lot of this is still these genres of music that, if you look at it, they've been around as long enough to be considered classic rock, but like, the youth are still providing, or, there's still a demand for it.
Change every day. This is Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
My name's Shaun Ross. I play bass in the Los Angeles band Excel.
And Shaun, how would you describe the music of Excel?
Originally, it was referred to locally, I guess, at power grinding hardcore, but I'd say hardcore punk crossover thrash.
Right. We'll be speaking about the last Excel release, Seeking Refuge. Would you say that your sound evolved over time, and by the time you reached that last album, you guys were doing something different from the crossover sound that people associate with you?
I think so. I think we just, we started in '85 and we started writing that probably around, there's some songs maybe from like 91, 92, but the most of it was written, closer to 95. We'd been playing, punk thrash the whole beginning of our career as a band. So I think we just kind of wanted to do something still heavy, but different, I guess.
Right.
Basically, one of the main differences is that around 92, our original lineup broke up. Our original guitar player and drummer left. So the drummer we settled on for Seeking Refuge couldn't really play fast well. So basically you hear that on the album as it being a mid-tempo album.
Interesting. And we can speak about Seeking Refuge in more depth in a little bit. I am curious though, when you guys formed, can you tell me a little bit about what brought you together and what led you to the hardcore punk scene?
Sure. I met Dan maybe around 1983 or early 84, like a punk show at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles. And we kind of hit it off right away. And he was in a band called Chaotic Noise with Adam, our original guitar player. And I got to know them well, and I kind of like started hanging out with them. And I guess I became what they called like their manager. And then by the end of 84, they kept going through different bass players, and they asked me if I wanted to join. And at the same time, going into 1985, we changed the name to Excel. And then kind of just, that's how like Excel came together, I guess, Yeah.
Can you paint a picture for me of what the LA punk and hardcore scene was like at that time? You guys were close with the Suicidal guys, right?
Yes. Yes. In the beginning we were, well, like there was the early 80s punk bands like Black Flag, Circle Jerks, and Germs, bands like that. But, closer to 84, towards the end of 84, a lot of those bands were dropping off, I guess, or just not as active. And so when we formed, it was kind of like, we were all like, Dan, Adam, and myself, we were all like, young kids and, going to punk shows in the early 80s. So I guess when we just started, then we also started like, becoming more influenced by metal bands, but we were all coming from like the punk side of things.
Yeah.
So kind of, we were kind of coming out of the early 80s punk rock scene and into something kind of totally new, which was, like, I guess for us was like our origin of crossover, what it became for us, what we, for our experience playing it.
And this was a time when hardcore and punk and even metal a little bit was, no pun intended, but was crossing over into like skateboarding and graffiti culture and stuff like that. Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first Suicidal Tendencies album is like a pretty metallic, like pretty, that was one of the first, that's like an early metal punk record, I think. The first Corrosion to Conform MIDI album was big influence to us. And we'd all been, like Dan and myself, we grew up skateboarding, so it kind of just went hand in hand.
In the early days, was your guitarist writing most of the music?
It was like it was 50-50 split between like writing riffs, Adam and myself.
Okay.
If you could kind of like, I didn't play on the Welcome to Venice songs,
Right.
you know, the songs from the compilation Welcome to Venice. And then if you listen to our first demo, songs like Spare the Pain, and then some of the stuff off our second demo, like you could hear where my influence kind of came in, I guess more like, you know, some of the heavier stuff, heavier riffs and more dissident riffs, I guess, was more my style.
As far as the dissonant stuff that you were bringing to the table, what were you listening to? What were your influences at that time?
Back then, you know, it was like, you know, a lot of like, you know, like Discharge, Crucifix, the heavier hardcore punk bands, Necros. I think in '83 we heard the first Corrosion Conformity, but then, you know, what influenced me a lot was I accidentally picked up the first Trouble album, which was self-titled. I believe it's referred to now as Psalm 9.
Right. Okay.
And that was kind of like really influential to me. I really didn't listen to heavy metal growing up. I kind of like skipped that, but listened to it later after I discovered punk and started experimenting more with listening to different kinds of music and stuff.
So let's talk about that Trouble album, because, you know, I came in a bit after, you know, I got into this stuff in like the mid 90s. And so by that time, you know, you could already put Trouble in a group with like the other doom metal bands. But in the 80s, there wasn't really anything called doom metal, right?
No, I mean, I think it was just basically, from my perspective, it seemed like it was Black Sabbath, and then there was like Trouble, which took it to another level.
Yeah.
Especially with their like instrument tones and guitar tones. But I, you know, in like, as come to find out, there's probably more bands like even before that we, without the internet, we weren't aware of, like Pentagram and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. But before the internet, like, you know, a lot of these bands like Vitus and The Obsessed were being released on these obscure European labels. And so it was hard to track that stuff down, you know, pre-internet, pre-streaming. And, you know, there are outliers here and there, but like there wasn't like a scene the way we think of there being a scene now. And so I think Trouble is a band that a lot of people cite as an influence. And I think, you know, all these years later, I think are overlooked in terms of the way they influenced bands to maybe take a slower approach.
Oh, absolutely. You know, because they said, you know, the riffs, it was just as heavy to us as like Discharge or something, but it was just executed differently.
Yeah.
From like, you know, when we first heard it, it was as influential as anything else we grew up listening to, you know? So, you know, that was kind of if you listen to our first two demos, I mean, I think it's apparent that we were super influenced by Trouble.
Yeah. Coming off of The Joke's on You, your second album, what kind of bands were you playing with? Were you still mostly playing with hardcore and crossover bands?
When Joke's on You came out, you know, we were starting to become like a nationally recognized band, and we were playing with a lot of, actually then we were playing more with like a lot of thrash bands, like maybe we would DRI, Testament, Flotsam Jetsam, but like we'd play mixed bills too. Our friends, we'd play with Blast often, Dark Angel. We did shows with White Zombie on the East Coast. In a way, it was, you know, it felt more, I mean, there's pretty like festivals and stuff mix a lot of genres together, but it seemed for some reason back then that there was more, it was easier to accomplish mixed bills for some reason. But yeah, we were playing like a lot of thrash bands,
yeah,
Violence, bands like that.
Yeah. It's funny. This is something that I talk about because, you know, thrash went away for a little while and then came back, and then it came back again, and it keeps coming back. And, you know, I'm sure you notice like all the kids who like go to shows dressed like it's 1987 with the denim vests and the patches and all that stuff.
Oh, totally.
What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think, I mean, it's great. You know, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's a lot of these, even it goes with like punk and hardcore. I think a lot of this is still these genres of music that, if you look at it, they've been around as long enough to be considered classic rock, but like, the youth are still providing, or, there's still a demand for it.
Yeah.
And then there's still new music coming out in these genres. And I think it's a great thing, But in actuality, a lot of this, like if you look back at bands like say UFO or, it's like seems like classic rock, but in reality, like these from 2004 to when some of these 80s bands, we've been around just as long, and it's still like, there's still, if you come to one of our shows, say in like Los Angeles, there's a lot of times, maybe 4 generations of different age groups from kids to people our age coming still, it's pretty cool. So,
yeah, I mean, I say I got into thrash the first time around, the big 4 were still at the height of their popularity when I got into the stuff. And so it's a little amazing to me when I see kids, I mean, like, like barely even high school age kids wearing Pusshead shirts or wearing Suicidal Tendencies shirts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like that was me and my friends in high school. And so like the fact that like there are new generations coming to this stuff is always a little surprising to me. But like, as far as this being classic rock, it does, I do feel it a little bit when I see, Metallica and Megadeth on dad rock compilations.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, we're we're trying to, we're working on writing a new record and working on making like a new record that isn't like, that's relevant, it's kind of, where we kind of notice, we want to do something relevant to today. We don't want to do like a throwback, necessarily. I mean, obviously throwback styles and our styles is going to be inherent to our experience, but we still want to kind of do something that, I don't know how to say it, I guess, like it's still like relevant in 2024, 2025,
Yeah.
It keeps it challenging, I guess,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are bands who are very happy. I'm talking about new bands who are very happy to do like a 1985, 1986 style crossover or thrash metal record. I'm curious if you feel how you feel about that and why you think that you need to keep Excel current.
Well, just, I mean, I still like feel like we see bands that are like maybe our peers and we want to we just want to be well, we want to represent ourselves well, but like times change, maybe the music with social media, recording like 5-6 minute songs with like 16 different changes that don't repeat might not be, people might not get it or might lose it. It might, you know what I mean? Like it's just,
Yeah,
I guess modernizing what we did then, is kind of what I guess I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Making it sound like, like we're not like, we're, still kind of in touch with what we do and what's going on.
Are there any current bands or any bands that came after you guys that you like?
I listen to, I mean, I listen to a lot of like, older music, like 60s psych rock, 70s roots, reggae. Still, there's been bands, there's probably a lot of bands there's so many different like genres, I guess. New bands, like some punk bands I like or listen to is Subdued, Rat Cage, Paranoid from Sweden. I don't listen to a lot of new metal. Maybe the last new metal I listened to maybe was like High on Fire, the new High on Fire.
Okay.
I still check out like what, in Megadeth, like Exodus, stuff like that when their new records come out.
Are you still in touch with a lot of the old thrash and crossover bands that you guys used to tour with back in the day?
Not really. Not really, not too often. I mean, we did some shows recently, like it's been a couple years now with Sacred Reich. We played with Blast from Santa Cruz recently, but we don't really necessarily, keep in touch, like just life
Yeah, I get it.
with like, day jobs and stuff like that. It's hard to keep in touch with, but if somebody's coming to town and they hit us up to play or whatnot, we're into doing stuff like that for sure.
So let's talk about Seeking Refuge. It was originally released in 1995 through Capitol Records, and Southern Lord Records recently re-released it in the middle of July. Let's start with, you spoke about how you guys are bringing in some new influences coming to this record. but you also lost you lost half your lineup, and you brought in some new members who weren't necessarily from the same background as you guys in terms of playing fast. But at the time that you guys were working on the music for this, there were incredible changes to the music industry, and especially the way, fast music, so old metal and old hardcore were viewed. Can you paint a picture for me of what the music scene was like at the time you guys were writing these songs?
I think it was kind of weird. Like, I think if I remember, like new metal was starting, and at the same time, like, I think like grunge was kind of like wiping the slate clean. We weren't really necessarily at the same time. We had been kind of not playing fast, and I guess taking a break from playing, punk thrash, and wanting to do something a little different. And also we started playing in drop D tuning and writing in drop D tuning, which had a lot to do with how that album sounds different for us. But I think that was happening. A good amount of other bands were doing the same thing,
I mean, one of the jokes that I make is, a lot of a lot of hardcore bands, and maybe this is more of like a 2000s thing, but a lot of hardcore bands started playing slow once they discovered weed.
No, we always knew about weed. I mean, we always had slow parts. That's one thing. We played like fast. Like we tried to keep like our, even on Split Image and Jokes on You, try to keep them like variety of tempos going. Even within the same song. And even Seeking Refuge is a mid-tempo album, but not necessarily slow. I wouldn't say it.
It's not a doom album. It's
like it's not definitely not a doom album. And when Adam left, I kind of like 95% of the riffs on that album I wrote, so it was kind of like what I was just playing at the time. So basically, we did stuff afterwards that was kind of like coming out of that. It was back to like, even though it was like maybe detuning, it's unrecorded stuff, or like there's some on the internet, but we were back to like playing fast, slow, more of like hardcore. I think it was just kind of where we were in at the moment.
Yeah. When Adam left, did you feel a lot more pressure to write new material?
Well, we kind of wanted to, I mean, for me personally, I kind of wanted to show that like I could do it. It wasn't because I'm a bass player, so you don't necessarily associate bass players with, the guitar riffs. So I felt not pressure, but I just wanted to kind of like prove myself, I think. So.
Can you tell me about recording the album? Where did you guys go?
For that one, we went to, I'd have to look. It was in Hollywood.
That's okay. I don't know if the name of the studio is that important, but it was with Ron Champagne, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who was he engineered like the first two Alice in Chains, first two Jane's Addictions, a bunch of other stuff. I think Offspring and Social Distortion.
Yeah. As far as his work with Jane's Addiction and Alice in Chains, was that more or less a sound that you wanted, at least for the guitar tone?
Not necessarily. I mean, they were like, those albums were considered like, they were for the time, like some great analog recordings. And we were aware of that. Dan was really into Jane's Addiction. So I think that was influential in choosing him. So, and plus we didn't have a ton of money to record it. So we were kind of like doing what we can to get an album done for what we had to spend, I think, it turned out, I think the recording and especially the remaster sounds, it holds up to anything today tonally.
Yeah. Did Brad Boatwright work on the remaster?
No, it was Nick Townsend.
Okay.
On this one.
Okay.
Who's someone that Greg Anderson at Southern Lord recommended us to.
Okay, cool. You guys were able to get HR to do some vocals on the album. How did you know HR? HR from Bad Brains, I should say.
Yeah, at the time, Bad Brains were like one of our favorite bands growing up. We'd been listening to them since we first heard the Pay to Come 7-inch when we were little kids. And so at the time I was working at a clothing company called Fucked in Los Angeles. And one of the owners had a friend who was like hanging out with HR in Venice. And I knew we were going to be doing the album. So I hit up my friend and said, hey, we're doing an album. It would be kind of like amazing if, for some reason you could ask your friend if HR would be interested in coming check us out. Maybe he'd somehow be interested in doing a song with us. And it eventually, it all just worked out that our friend, they dropped him off at the studio and he ended up living with me for the next like 6 months. I was living in the clothing company warehouse. Like I was kind of squatting.
Right.
And then I had room for like, other people to stay with me. He had nowhere to stay at the time. So I just had them stay with me. So.
Do you have any good HR stories?
The best story I could tell is like our involvement in helping get them, Bad Brains hadn't played, had been broken up, I believe, like 8 years at that point. HR kind of like, he thought I had money because I was in a clothing warehouse. And he had me type up a record contract for a solo album he wanted to do. And it gave me the idea. So there was another clothing company that we had a retail store with. It was called Extra Large Clothing. And the Beastie Boys were affiliated with that. So we had a clothing store. It was called X Fucked in Hollywood. And so I know the owners of Extra Large Clothing were affiliated with the Beastie Boys. So I talked to them and I say, hey, I've got HR at my house. And he's coming to me for a record contract. So I was wondering if you could maybe set up a meeting with us, with maybe Adam Yout or the guys at Grand Royal Records. So ends up we, flash forward a couple weeks or a month or so, Dan and I took HR to Lollapalooza and we had a meeting with the Beastie Boys. And basically that was like how that kind of set off initiated the reunification of the Bad Brains for the God of Love record.
Oh, cool.
So, the best HR story, it was interesting and, it was an interesting time, but that's like the best story I could tell, it was like that's something positive. Well, at least, that's what HR wanted to do, is put out a record. So we were able to like take part in, do our part and try to make that happen. Whether the outcome was great or not, we're not sure, but
right.
We were able to help out, someone that we had like looked up to in high regard for most of our life and, for a good portion of our life at that point. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh, and then like they did a show. We did a show. I think it was for Haile Selassie's birthday or coronation or something, and it was the first Bad Brain show in 8 years, and it was like we put together this small Bad Brains Excel show, and it was like one of the coolest shows we played, and it was like super, like maybe a couple hundred people there, and then, that was pretty cool too, getting to play with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Seeking Refuge is referred to as the Lost Excel album. Why was it lost? Why is it considered a lost album?
I think just,
it came out on a major, right?
Yeah, it came out on a major. Well, it was distributed by Capitol, but it was put out by Delicious Vinyl. They had a rock subsidiary at the time called Malicious Vinyl. So, but even, I think it wasn't, we were one of the first albums out on that label and it wasn't established. Plus, when something, that was our seeing that a band like us on a major label might be somewhat invisible just because of the circumstances, we're not like a priority and for other reasons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, they're like, they do better, I think, maybe for the Beatles and, you know what I mean? Like,
Right. So do you feel like the the label wasn't pushing the album enough?
It could have been. I mean, yeah. I mean, we toured it. You know, we did like an extensive U.S. tour and Europe tour. Yeah, I just don't think we had a music video. The music video didn't get played on MTV. It's like, I think, and then I think at that time, that's kind of what you needed. And we didn't get picked up on like, you know, things that don't really necessarily matter now.
Right.
Mattered then in order to get like recognition and to get in like into the flow of it all on that level.
Yeah. And the things that don't matter as much now that you're referring to, do you mean magazines? Printed
well, like major radio,
right?
Like
okay.
Getting played on like major, you know, regular radio, and then like getting your video on MTV. You know, now it's like you could have like a demo on SoundCloud and for some reason become like nationally or internationally noticed, you know?
Yeah.
But that didn't exist back then. You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying things like, unless you're back then, it seemed there was more to it. You know, there was like more, we didn't just get, it didn't catch on, I guess, you know? So. What
about Excel fans? Was the album well received by the people who, by the audience you already had?
You know, I think it was disappointing and somewhat to, you know, because like a lot of times we'd play and we'd be requested to play songs that we weren't going to play because they were off our other albums.
And was the new lineup part of the reason why you guys weren't playing the older songs?
It is, some of it, you know, like our drummer at the time couldn't play fast. So
yeah,
that was one of the reasons. And I think, you know, we were just kind of like not in that mindset to go like, you know, just to play hardcore at the time. And we're, you know, taking a chance to play something different. So even though, you know, it seems like if you play songs in the set now, it's not like that much different, you know, playing in the songs in the set of us playing songs off our first two records.
Right.
But at the time it was, I think people, if they knew us from our past, you know, they were hoping, a lot of times they'd be hoping like we'd play what we would consider, you know, the classic Excel songs.
And there's also a 6-year gap between Joke's on You and Seeking Refuge, right?
There is, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we there's demos like from that time because we were like, we did a demo for Chrysalis. We did some weird home movie thing demo for Island Records. It was like, we were just kind of at the time, like doing these demos for major labels. In between that 5-year time, there's music out there, but that has never, a lot of it's on YouTube, but it just never really was properly recorded and released. But we were doing stuff, but
yeah. I mean, it sounds like you guys were affected by like all the changes that were happening in the industry, you know, as far as like, you know, metal becoming this thing that people were keeping at arm's length.
Yeah, that was kind of definitely part of it. Like we definitely didn't want to play new metal.
Right.
And we weren't like, you know, we weren't trying to be like a grunge band all of a sudden. So
yeah,
that could definitely be a part of it. It was definitely a time of changing of the guards.
So we were speaking about the response to Seeking Refuge and the difficulties you guys faced once the album was released. What happens after that? What happens to Excel after Seeking Refuge comes out?
Dan and I kept playing for a couple more years, like different incarnations of Excel, different under different names. And then around 1998, 99, we just kind of took a break on it. I'd been playing music for 14 years and my career working in skateboarding was kind of like taking precedent, I guess. I worked skateboarding and streetwear, and we just kind of took a break from it until we reunited in 2014. Not reunited, but, reconvened, I guess.
All right.
I'd say.
And we spoke a little bit about the way the classic 80s crossover and thrash bands came into vogue with a new generation of metal and hardcore fans, I should say. Did you notice that the stuff was becoming popular again, like circa 2004, 2005?
Yes, definitely. Like we're noticing it before that, but yeah, definitely. And then, I think, there was just like the demand to play again. Our friends, so around 2010, 2011, an old friend hit me up to play bass for his hardcore band. His name is Alex Barretto. He played in Chain of Strength.
Right. Yeah.
And then Chain of Strength, we were doing this hardcore band called Fraud. And then at some point, Chain of Strength started discussing and started getting ready to do their reunion. And then Alex said, "Hey, why don't we see what's up? Maybe you guys should try to do it." So Alex was actually played guitar with us for the first up until recently. So we were like, why not? And then it kind of just set the ball in motion. Once we said we were going to do the first show, we've been just doing shows since, I guess. And then since we've been doing shows since, it's been a while now. So, that's where it's kind of like, I feel like we have to do a new record as even if it's like the final bookend to our story.
Yeah.
It definitely hardcore, thrash, crossover thrash, all these genres seem definitely more popular than they were initially, in the 80s,
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about sometimes seeing four generations of music fans at your shows. Do you feel like the culture around the music has changed?
I don't think so. I mean, aside from back then, a lot of it was done in person more so than like online. Maybe that's the only difference.
Right.
I mean, when I started, I was doing a fanzine in 1983 when I met Dan, and that's how I'd communicate with, I'd have to write to all the bands I was really into,
Yeah.
And then when we started doing our demos, we had to trade tapes with people and everything was mailed correspondence, so.
Oh, I remember.
It was more, it was much more personalized interactions.
Yeah. It was also very one-to-one, right? Back in the day, there were no mailing lists. It was you found an address, or sometimes in the back of the zine, people who were looking to trade, and you wrote to that specific person, as opposed to now, it's very depersonalized, where you post something and 100 or maybe a couple hundred or maybe even thousands of people see it, but you don't really interact with those people on a one-to-one basis the way we did back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the only difference I could see, I mean, there's probably great advantages to having this much information about music at your fingertips at any time, you could look at anything in any genre.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to discover new music than it was then. You had to really search for it back then.
And, Excel is one of the bands that benefited from that, right? Any kid who heard Municipal Waste or Toxic Holocaust back, whenever those bands were getting popular, if they looked deeper into the music, then they would stumble across Excel, No Mercy, Infectious Grooves, and stuff like that, that radio stations weren't playing, magazines weren't covering anymore.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think that's, it's part of the like journey into searching. If someone's interested in cures like municipal waste, they always like, they'd wear Excel shirts and they covered some of our songs. Sometimes, they covered a song a couple times maybe. And like, it obviously, it's definitely, if people look deeper, they'll find us, for sure.
Looking back, would you have done anything differently in that period between The Joke's on You and Seeking Refuge?
Probably.
I understand that a lot of it was out of your hands, like in terms of the way the industry was playing games with you. But I'm just curious what you would have done differently.
I mean, it's hard to tell. I guess the one thing we would have done is like, incorporated fast stuff, or just not like been limited, to the kind of music we could play on Seeking Refuge. But it it's hard to say because, the way it happened. I mean, maybe doing a follow-up record that was more like, because one thing Seeking Refuge is definitely not a follow-up to The Joke's on You. And I think that's what, if anything, I would have wanted to do is release a follow-up to The Joke's on You. But that's, what we can do now is we're working on writing and recording that follow-up record. So maybe, who knows what it would have done in the years after Seeking Refuge. But, now we kind of like have it's whatever, it's all up to us what we want it to do. And we want what we want it to be, so that, it's all good, I guess.
When did Southern Lord get in touch with you about re-releasing these albums? Starting with the first two and then later Seeking Refuge?
As soon as we started doing reunion shows in like 2014, Greg was like one of the first people that hit us up. He'd been into Excel since like the first demo in the 80s. So, he was well aware of us. He's he grew up playing in hardcore punk bands and stuff before he did Southern Lord. So he was, I guess, in the know of us. And Southern Lord does great reissues, like historically correct reissues of a lot of bands. And it just made sense, Yeah. The quality, like everything from the printing and to what he's willing to include, and the split image reissue, he spared no expense to like include whatever we wanted to include. So it made sense to do Seeking Refuge with him. Seeking Refuge was he didn't know about Seeking Refuge, even like being someone who was aware of us through our whole career, because that's how it was, until like maybe 2020, 2021, when I mentioned to him, hey, did you hear this other album we did? So
is that the reason why it took so long for Seeking Refuge to be reissued? Greg just didn't know about it?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, we wanted to get the first two out. That took it took a little time to get the master tapes and to scan all the pictures and collect all the stuff we're going to include. And then while we were doing Seeking Refuge, it took longer because COVID happened while we were doing it. So
right. That
slowed it down a little. But yeah, I mean, we wanted to get the first two out first. And then, we were kind of like, it became like between Dan and I, we were like, we might as well get this out. And it makes sense that they're all on the same label,
Yeah. So you mentioned that Excel are working on new material. Can you tell me what the progress is on the new material, as far as like how many songs you have and when you expect the album to be ready?
We have about we're hoping for next year. We have about I'd say 6 solid songs, and we're going to demo them this year. And then we're going to, with the intention of getting into the studio the first quarter of next year and start recording it.
Very cool. And what can people expect?
I think to say, split image, jokes on you, style, crossover, Excel style crossover, somewhat modernized a little, I think. I don't know, doing songs that are 6 minutes long, if the attention span, if it makes sense doing in 1985, we did like 5-6 minute songs with 16 parts that never repeated. I don't know if that makes sense, in 2024, but yeah, like hopefully, and as well as like a proper follow up to the jokes on you.
So, Seeking Refuge is out now through Southern Lord Records.
Oh yes.
Shaun, please tell everyone how they can order the album. What's the best way to get it?
It's excelsl.bandcamp.com.
And Southern Lord has physical releases on their web shop as well, right?
Yes, Southern Lord web shop and Southern Lord Europe as well.
Do you want to say anything about the vinyl version that Southern Lord produced for this album?
Oh yeah, we did clear for Record Store Day, and now like the second pressing is red.
Okay.
Red vinyl. If you get on Bandcamp, you get the digital download with it as well.
Cool. And there's still copies of the red vinyl available?
Yes, there are.
And if people want to follow Excel online and get updates on shows and release info on the album when it comes out, what's the best way to follow you guys?
That'd be Excel, EXCEL, official.com, or Excel at Excel Official on Instagram and Facebook.
Very cool. So you've been very generous with your time, Shaun, but is there anything else you want to say?
No, thank you. I mean, if there's any Excel fans listening, thank you for your support. We look forward to putting out a new album that you can check out.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Shaun.
Thank you. Appreciate it.